What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here, local realtor in Surrey, Langley, and the rest of the Fraser Valley, as well as Vancouver. I am on the Client First Collective real estate team, as well as with Real Broker. And today I have with me Jamie Burke from Burke by Burke, and she's going to go over some of the myths about strata properties and what you need to know as a first-time home buyer or just somebody who is moving into strata for the first time. She has a very lengthy resume, so I'm not even going to try and touch on it myself. I'm going to let her dive into it, so take it away.
Oh, you're too much, Alex. Well, I'm a long time fan, first time caller. So thanks so much for having me here. As Alex said, I'm a former strata manager turned real estate marketer. Some of you might know me as Anxious Millennial Marketer. If you don't, you can check out my newsletter on LinkedIn. And I also run a real estate marketing agency, Burke by Burke, with my husband / business partner / life partner extraordinaire, Eddie. And yeah, but before all of that, by real estate marketing life, I was a strata manager for a number of years. And that's what we're here to talk about.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your strata management background, just because to me, I deal with them a lot on a daily basis almost, and it seems like a very stressful job. So what was your experience with that?
You know what? I always used to joke that strata managers and realtors were like mortal enemies, like Mortal Kombat. Like, I don't know, Mortal Kombat fans out there, Ryu versus Ken, because realtors would always call asking for information. And I think there was always this conception that like we didn't want to help realtors. And then for strata managers, there's always this idea that realtors are being annoying because like we don't understand each other's worlds or unless you take the time to understand. So strata management is chaotic. It's like watching a house burn down and the truck is driving by and the fire truck is also on fire and you have one cup of water.
Sounds a little bit like the real estate world or a lot of the rest of it as well. It's always trying to put out fires essentially, right? We have to wear so many hats, but I can definitely understand where you're coming from because I know for us, we're usually going through subject removal. We want answers quickly. And I know you always have a lot on your plate in that position. And it seems like some people are quicker to get back than others, and I'm sure there's this disconnect of people are asking, I don't want to say stupid questions, but questions that they could probably figure out on their own, and now they're relying on somebody else. But yeah, I don't know if I could do it, so props to you.
No, thanks. Well, I mean, I guess I don't do it anymore, but thank you for the kudos for during my time. I think one of the things that you were saying that I really saw was, this definition of like, what's a glass ball? Like, I say glass ball for like urgent matters versus a plastic ball. So like realtors and strata managers have two very different definitions. Like a realtor might have like a subject removal and they really need to understand this comment on the strata property minutes. But to a strata manager who's dealing with a flood, that's like their last thing that they worry about. So I think there's always this big disconnect. And I think something I've really tried over the years is trying to help bridge that disconnect, because I think at the end of the day, realtors and strata managers, we all want the same thing. And that's the best service for our clients to be happy in their homes and happy in their communities. So I think that's part of, what we're trying to do here, try to bridge that together and, really just help people in their homes.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. And it's a good transition into the first point I wanted to talk about, because as you're saying, we have these timelines that we're trying to meet and we're trying to get all the information and all the answers prior to moving forward with actually purchasing something, because that's a major purchase. So I have clients all the time that they think, hey, I'm going to purchase this condo. I'm going to go in, I'm going to do all these massive renovations and make it beautiful exactly the way I want it. But that's not always true, is it?
That's like the classic myth, right? And you know what? I get it, right? People spend years saving for the 5, 10, 15, 20% down. I don't know what down percent is. That's a different episode, right? But, people spend years and years saving money to finally buy a home, and home ownership is something to be so prideful and proud of. So I get it. When owners buy, a unit, they buy a strata lot, a condo, a townhome, whatever it may be. And yeah, they want to do what they want to do. Sure, let's just, okay, so there's like the long answer, the short answer. The short answer is like, sure, you could like technically do whatever you want, like technically, but then like Wile E. Coyote could technically eat the roadrunner whenever he wants, right? Whether or not you should, that's hopefully that makes sense, right? I don't know if I went too loony with the Looney Tunes reference.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, because I know people have been in positions where they kind of will do something that maybe they're not fully allowed to do, but they also understand the potential repercussions behind that. And if it's just, for instance, in what I see a lot of times, especially out in the Fraser Valley, is that people have a tandem style garage and they'll actually put an additional room into the back side of it. And if all they've done is put up a wall with drywall and they know that the risk is we're going to have to take that down if we're requested to, what's the risk reward ratio there?
Yeah.
And if there's other people that are already doing it within the strat itself, even though maybe it's not allowed, if you've seen that it's kind of been accepted to an extent, maybe you have a little more leeway just based on what your neighbors are doing. Again, not to say it's right or wrong, but as long as you understand what the potential risks or downside are.
Yeah, so there was a line that one of my mentors said, and if you're watching this, this one's for you. She would say that there isn't a strata police. So there isn't this officers of the strata law looking out for people who are breaking smoking bylaws or building unauthorized suites in their basement. But just because this strata police doesn't exist doesn't mean that the bylaws and rules aren't in place. I think part of the responsibility of owners is understanding that part of buying into a strata lot is agreeing to abide by those rules and bylaws. And I think that's part of being a good neighbor. So, like I said, the long answer is sure, you can technically, but you run the risk of breaking rules and bylaws. You run the risk of not fostering a sense of safe community for your neighbors. And you run the potential risk of really, really high fines. Fines that could... I've seen fines escalate to the 20,000s. I mean, whether or not they actually collect it, that's for the Civil Resolution Tribunal to determine. But I mean, it's still something. It's a risk. So yeah. So we can't tell people what to do, but we can tell people that they have to make their choices.
No, it makes sense. So moving on to my next question is, a lot of times, first-time buyers, or again, people that haven't lived in strata properties before, have questions around insurance and how exactly that works, because you're going to have your essentially strata policy per se, and then your own, which is going to cover something a little bit different. So could you go into a little bit of detail there?
Absolutely. Now, this one, there's no gray in this. Get insurance. Get insurance. Okay, thumbs up. Tell me you're going to get your own insurance. I say that because you have to. This one, there's no ifs, whens, and buts about it. Your strata corporation has a policy for their strata corporation, in essence, and that's going to cover, let's say your lobby floods or there's a fire in the gym. That's going to cover the damages up to a deductible amount, and your strata will be protected in that regard. But let's say you have water damage in your unit, and let's say it's technically your fault. And the thing is, fault is interesting because people think that ignorance absolves them of fault, but that's not true. So let's say you forget to, maintain your toilet seal and there's a leak, that's still your fault. Even if you're oh, I didn't know, the strata law doesn't care if you didn't know, it's still your responsibility. Mm-hmm. So anyway, long story short, let's say you have a leak and it causes $75,000 in damage, and your strata's deductible is $50,000, but you, because you wanted to save money, didn't get insured to that full amount. You're not going to who's going to be responsible for paying that difference. Because you might be you might go to your personal insurance provider and say, oh yeah, hey, give me the cheapest policy. Don't go for the cheapest policy. Okay. Well, it's true because it's easy to be oh yeah, let's skim on this pricing because we can afford a cheaper policy. The easiest advice, Alex, really is when, first time home buyer, all those documents that your lovely realtor like Alex will send, that insurance policy, and I'm sure you've seen how many have you seen?
Tons.
Yeah. So the easiest thing to really do is just get that, email it, print it, messenger pigeon it, whatever, to your personal insurance provider, which is separate from your strata insurance provider, and just ask them to cover you for the full deductible amounts. That's pretty much I could go on and on. I've seen horror stories. I personally was a victim of an insurance policy, but I was covered to the full deductible amount, and it covered everything. It covered and there's expenses you don't even think of, like the moving van if you have to move out of your home, your Airbnb costs, your food costs when you're out if you have to be displaced during a claim. So it's just really, really important. There's no dicing that one. You have to get your own separate insurance.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, what I found a lot lately is there's some new companies that have entered the market that are more digital per se, and there's no one necessarily on the other side that's kind of helping you through the process, like your insurance agent, I guess we'll call them. And my biggest fear, biggest concern is that, yes, you might be paying a lower price, but do you know whether you're actually covered or not? And I'm no expert in insurance itself. I have a good understanding of it. And as you mentioned before with the insurance deductibles, that's one of the first things I send over to my clients during the subject removal process, and outlines instructions and gives them plenty of options for, hey, go get this checked out with multiple different companies. You can get different quotes if you want to, but make sure you're speaking to someone on the other side of it, because it doesn't matter if you're saving a little bit of money every single month, because when you actually go, hopefully you never have to, but when you actually have the claim, if you're not covered for the amount that's there, that's going to hurt you a lot more than your extra $20 a month or whatever that number may be. So I always want people to have peace of mind. If you become an expert in that and you get a better understanding over time and you want to go to those other companies later, maybe do that. But off the start, I just personally don't think it's a good idea.
Absolutely agreed. And I could speak from personal experience, because if I wasn't covered up to my full deductible amount, I would be paying for my own Airbnb when I was flooded. That actually, true story, that happened to me a couple of years ago. I was flooded, but yeah, I would have been paying for all of that. So I'm very grateful that I paid for the full insurance up to the full deductible amounts.
Yeah, because you never hear about the claims that go well. You only hear about the ones that go poorly, unfortunately. And there's more than I'd like to say I've heard about before. But moving on, a lot of clients I talk to or people feel like strata fees are a waste of money, right? So first of all, I'd love to hear a little bit about what they typically cover and why you think they are good or bad, because I know some people feel, oh, I'd rather just go into a self-managed strata, but they have their own issues, of course. So would you like to dive a little bit deeper into that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's funny because I did real estate strata corporation budgets for years, but now I'm in marketing, so I never want to look at an Excel spreadsheet again. But, during the time that I was doing budgets, I think it's really important for, owners or prospective owners to understand that, the budget makes up far more than just your strata management fees. I think there's this huge misconception and a disproportionate conception at that strata management fees all go to the strata management company. If you really look at it line by line by line, the strata management company is really just one line item. I think it's best to actually look at your strata management company as a vendor. So like a contractor that does similar work. So your question about like what does it cover? Look at strata management fees the same way you would look at paying for a landscaper, paying for waste removal, paying for plumbing or mechanical or snow removal or, amenity, or if you have an in-house caretaker, those kinds of things. And really, when you break down each and every single line and you see what it takes to run your strata corporation, and then when that's separated to strata fees for each unit based on unit entitlement, we don't have to go into the boring unit entitlement conversation today. But pretty much, by the time you look at it, it's a lot more reasonable dollar for dollar than people, I think, understand.
Yeah, and I think from my experience, the times where maybe, I don't want to say it's a waste of money, or money is typically misallocated or allocated in the incorrect way, maybe because they're being lazy with the service providers that they're choosing and they have to replace them over and over again, which I understand can happen, because you do want to make sure you're getting the best bang for your buck. But typically, those are the companies I'm seeing that are getting fired because they've had a new provider every single year over a long period of time. And obviously, if that money was being used more efficiently or to the right places, then as you're saying, it's not like all this money is just being given to the strata corporation itself. So on another note on that too, is that I have a lot of people just think the lowest strata fee is always going to be the best. But in my opinion, I'd love to hear you elaborate a little bit on this, that sometimes it's actually better to have a higher strata fee based on how they're planning for the future. So that's something I always look into, and I say, just because it's lower, you may be hit with a major special levy, special assessment down the road. We don't know. We have to dive a little bit deeper. But just because you have a higher strata fee doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad thing. So,
funny enough, I actually see it maybe the opposite way that maybe the general perception is I actually see low strata fees as a bit of a red flag rather than the other way. Because I think the average first-time home buyer, and absolutely, like we were saying earlier about trying to save money and, really allocate your funds to the best way possible. So of course, like when you're first looking, you want to pay lower strata fees. But really when I see lower strata fees, that's a sign to me that they're under budgeting for the care and maintenance of that building. Are they allocating enough to their contingency reserve fund? For those listeners who don't know contingency reserve fund, think of it like a piggy bank. That's the best way to think of it. It's like your rainy day fund. So, when you see low strata fees, are they just putting in the bare minimum to their CRF? Are they deferring maintenance? Is the council dysfunctional? Because actually another point you were saying about the strata management companies or firms being lazy or allocating resources inefficiently, that could be true. So, I'm not going to be completely defensive of strata management companies, but I also think there's this misconception that a strata manager is a strata manager. Another, way I heard it called by one of my former colleagues, they actually said it was more like a strata administrator. So really, they're only bound by the decisions that a strata council can make. So if a strata council is not approving the allocation of funds, then the strata manager can't do anything. But then it's a double-edged sword because then now the owners think that it was the strata manager who made that decision, not the strata council. Which I get, the sword has to fall on somebody, right? And it's easier to fall on a stranger in an office than it is your neighbor who might be the council president, right?
Yeah, and I think that all comes back to the fact that we mentioned in the beginning of this video is just the lack of information and accessibility to that information that people have. And so, as you said, they have to point the finger at somebody, and obviously it's probably going to be the person that maybe doesn't have as much of an ability to defend themselves per se.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I get that, right? It's easier to point at some mythical strata manager image that's out there than it is your real life neighbor, or, not, maybe this is too harsh, or maybe yourself for not fully understanding what it is that you bought into, which is part of what we're trying to do here is educate owners or prospective owners into knowing what a strata corporation is.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that is, even if you want a detached home, it's not free, right? There's ongoing maintenance, which is a lot of what this is paying for. You just may not realize that because you live in an individual unit and you're not necessarily walking out the front door and looking at your roof every day or looking at the siding. Maybe you are, but I think it just feels a little bit different because it is this shared ownership essentially. So I think we pretty much touched on everything that I was looking to get into today. I don't know if there's any final points or anything you'd like to leave the viewers with.
Yeah, absolutely. Honestly, I think strata living gets a bit of a bad rep, but I really think, especially with the way that global trends are, immigration, we've talked a lot about people coming into Canada, the population growth, etc. I think strata living is going to be the way forward. And I think strata living can be great. And I think we can just shed some of the negative perceptions around it. And I think strata living has a lot more to offer than we give it credit for. So yeah, say hi to your neighbors, be kind to each other. Strata ain't so bad. I think I'll say that. And you don't have to be nice maybe you should be nice to your strata manager, but be kind, maybe be understanding. Maybe this will help you understand a bit more where they're coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And so if you have any questions, both of our contact information will be down below. She's the expert here, so maybe pass some of those her way. But of course, if you are looking for any advice in purchasing real estate or any of the services that you offer, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for that, Alex. Yeah, so pretty much when I left property management and pursued real estate marketing, it's pretty much like this conversation that we are having. Part of what we want to do at Burke by Burke, which is our real estate marketing agency, is make this kind of information more accessible to the everyday person in Vancouver, in the Fraser Valley, BC, Canada, and make this information so it's not covered behind this ivory tower of only certain people can understand real estate. We want to make information accessible. So, I write articles and blogs. We do other marketing materials as well. But it's really at the forefront of putting that education component first and making real estate feel, a little more accessible to everybody.
No, I love that because that's kind of how I run my own business.
Yeah.
I'm not here to sell anybody anything. I just want to educate you and empower you to make a well-informed decision that you're happy and confident with at the end of the day. So thanks so much for watching, guys. We will see you in the next one, and bye.